going to talk about a true crime case that is a non-violent case. Non-violent cases are cases in which there is no force or injury done to another person. So, for instance, those could be drug crimes. Those can be crimes relating to theft. And in this case, this is a specific crime related to theft. It's called squatting. Well, squatting, what do I mean by that? I'm not talking about like when you're in the weight room and you're doing squats, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about house squatting. And it is a crime that is growing in our country. So what is squatting? What is a squatter? Well, let's look at this definition of a squatter. A squatter is a person who unlawfully occupies an uninhabited building or unused land. A squatter lives on a property to which they have no title, right, or lease. And that's what I'm looking at. That's what we're going to be looking at today, a squatter. When you search this topic on YouTube, you're going to come across all of these different cases that have made it on the news. Victims, homeowners who have fallen victim to this type of theft, house squatting. For instance, if you leave your home, if you are a single individual and you have military duty, and then you come back to your house and it's inhabited by strangers who are claiming that that is their house, they're living in your house. Actually, when you research this squatting, squatters have rights. And this is crazy, right? I mean, this is our house. How can a stranger come and live in our house and say that it's theirs, right? This is ludicrous. And so, what does the Bible have to say about this? What does the Bible have to say about squatting? This true crime Bible case definitely deals with this topic. And this actually happened to a woman. We're not given her name, but it's the woman of Shunem, the Shunammite woman. She's from the town of Shunem. And her story is found in 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 8 through 37. In 2 Kings chapter 8, verses 1 through 6. And when you read about this woman, you're going to find that she is a wealthy, godly woman. She has a very big house. She has lots of land. She's married and later has a son. And, and she actually becomes friends with the prophet Elisha. And so Elisha tells her one day, he says, there's a famine that's going to be coming to your land, and you need to leave your house. This is not an easy thing to do, right? I mean, someone is telling you that bad is going to happen in your town, and you're telling me that I'm going to have to leave my house and leave my land. Like, my family's going to have to leave, right? We see this in another situation in the Bible with Lot, right? Lot and his family. They've been forewarned that danger is coming to their land, a natural disaster, and that you need to leave it, right? So the Shunammite woman is facing the same situation. It's a famine. It's not an earthquake or tornado, but it's a famine, and you need to leave. And she's obedient, and she leaves. Do you know how long it is before she can return back to her house, back to her property, back to what her and her husband have built, have taken their whole life and built for themselves? Do you know how many years? 7 years. 7 years. The famine is ended, so she comes back to her home, And you would think it would be wonderful, right? Oh, it's so good to be back home, right? I mean, I've been away and it's so good to be home. And she comes back and there are squatters. There are people who are living in her house, acting like it's their house, have taken over her land and saying it's theirs. That would not be a good welcome, right? Well, how does this woman respond to the situation? How does this woman respond to this situation? Because, you have to remember, when she left her home, she was being obedient to God, right? And she comes back, and this is what happens, right? She could have said to herself, she could have been bitter, right? This is what obedience to God means. I lose my stuff. I lose what me and my husband have spent our whole lives, blood, sweat, and tears poured into this house, poured into this land. And this is what obeying God means. This is what it means. She could have been very bitter because this was a major curveball in her life. And this was not the first curveball that had happened in this woman's life. In 2 Kings, in those 2 chapters and in those verses, we're given the other curveballs that she's went through. She went through many years of praying to have a baby. And she finally has a baby, has a son, an only child. And then that son grows up, and then one day he's out in the field with his dad, and out of nowhere his head starts hurting. And then this turns into a very dangerous situation. This actually takes his life. And there's a miracle that actually happens, and this son's life is given back to him. And Elisha was a major contributing factor into allowing this to happen. But these are the curveballs that this woman has been through, okay? And so you can see that she's not bitter from that. That's already happened, okay? So how does she handle this situation? What she doesn't go to her house and tell those people she's going to try to handle it her way and try to get those people out. Right? This is my house. You get out. No. She goes through the proper channels. She goes and pleads her case in court in front of the judge. Now, back in the Bible times, kings had very powerful positions. Okay? When you think about our government today, we have the legislative branch, we have the executive branch, and we have the judicial branch, right? The legislative branch makes the laws. The executive branch enforces the laws. And the judicial branch interprets the laws. And so there's many people that do those jobs, right? But back in the Bible times, this shows you how powerful a king was, because one person encompassed all of those roles, all 3 branches of government, okay? So the king was actually the judge too. Whenever matters arose, conflict arose, they brought it to the king. And so she brings her case to the king. And when she meets with the king, and we're not given his name, he is actually not by himself. He has a visitor with him. And the visitor is one of the Shunammite's woman's friends. It is Gehazi. And Gehazi is the servant of the prophet Elisha. And Gehazi, Elisha, they're both close friends with this Shunammite woman. And so when the Shunammite woman goes and pleads her case to the king, he is actually having a discussion with Gehazi. this actually happens. They were actually talking about what had gone on in this Shunammite woman's life. And Gehazi is recounting this incident that Elisha had performed with the Shunammite woman's son about performing this miracle that, he was raised back to life. And so, she pleads her case in front of the king, and the outcome is just wonderful. This is when the government got it right. This is when true justice was executed for this Shunammite woman. The outcome of this case was the king ruled that those squatters needed to get out of her house. Those people that had inhabited her land, her house, out. And she can move back into her house. On top of that, he also granted the value of any of the crops that had been harvested during her absence. Wow. Isn't this true justice? God created government to be the minister of justice. And this is when the government official got it right. And when true justice was executed for the victim. So what can we learn from this? What are two takeaways that we can take away from this, from squatters, from falling victim of squatters taking over our house, our land? Number one, know your state's laws. It is crazy. When I was doing this research for this topic of squatting, I came across awful articles of how to encourage criminals to do this, how to encourage criminals to take advantage of homeowners and property owners. I came across research in which squatters have rights. So this is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. When we think the law is for us, for the victims, for the homeowner, it can actually be turned the other way around. And so know your state laws. If you're ever going to leave your house, make sure you have a security system set up in your house, or make sure that you have somebody who's checking up on your house from time to time. Don't leave it vacated. Have a friend or a family member live in the house while you're gone for an extended period of time. Number two, if you know of resources or connections that you can help a person who has fallen victim to house squatters, help them. Help them out. Use those connections for them. Give them those resources. Because we see in this particular true crime case that Gehazi was of big help to this Shunammite woman. God allowed the timing for this Shunammite woman's time to plead her case in front of the king. Perfect timing. Because Gehazi was already there. Gehazi was having a discussion with the king, and that helped the Shunammite woman's case drastically. So if you are gifted in this area of law, if you are gifted in this area of whatever connections, resources that you can help of a person or persons who have fallen victim to house squatting, then I encourage you to use that, because you never know. You may be that Gehazi in someone's life. Well, friend, I love this true crime case. We're going to be looking at part 2 next time. Things that you want to know. You're not going to want to miss this. That is my spiritual food for you to munch on. I can't wait to see you next time.